Chapter 11 in the International Code Book discusses anything having to do with refrigeration. Now this could be air conditioning, this could be any type of process cooling, anything having to do with the process of cooling one thing from another. So section 1101, as usual, starts off with the general scope. Gives some definitions, for example, factory built equipment and appliances, protection, water connections, fuel gas connections, which again it will refer to the International Fuel Gas Code, because International Mechanical Code does not cover fuel gases. It talks about the maintenance of the equipment and talks about refrigerant discharge. And again, refrigerant discharge, it talks about the International Fire Code. 11-02 talks about system requirements. What are the classifications of the equipment? Where is it installed? 11022 also talks about the refrigerants. Talks about purity of refrigerants and mixing of refrigerants, which you cannot do. Section 1103 talks about refrigerant system classifications. How are these classified? Make sure you know the different classifications. Institutional occupancy, public assembly, residential, commercial, large mercantile, industrial, and mixed. This is very important both from a refrigerant standpoint and also from a safety standpoint. Make sure you understand system classifications. 1104 talks about system application requirements. There's some general requirements that refer back to .1 and .3, but then it moves on. You also will find in here tables that give you the chemical formulas for every various type of refrigerant out there. It gives you the chemical formulas, gives you the chemical names. It also tells you what's in any blended refrigerants. And it gives you the refrigerant classification, the safety classification. Remember, A is non-flammable, 1 is non-toxic. So you have a couple pages of those charts. Then it also goes back to 1104 with machinery rooms. What type of refrigerant safety devices are supposed to be in there? What refrigerants are required? Industrial and occupancies, refrigerated rooms. Talks about what you can have in there. Maximum quantities of refrigerants are also talked about. How many pounds for various occupancy of refrigerants are allowed. 1104 continues to talk about refrigerants. Then 1105 talks about machinery rooms and general requirements. What type of openings are required? Do we need to have a refrigerant detector? And again, it refers to International Fire Code. Talks about having to do with fuel burning appliances and refrigeration. What type of ventilation is required? In this section 1105.6 it says very specifically machinery rooms shall be mechanically ventilated to the outdoor. Okay, mechanical ventilation shall be capable of exhausting the minimum quantity of air both at normal and emergency conditions. Might have to have multiple fans. And then you'll have a whole bunch of quantities and formulas for normal and emergency ventilation, and it also talks about ammonia and the termination of relief devices. In other words, pressure relief. What happens if the refrigerant pressure gets too high in a refrigeration system? 1106 talks about machinery room special requirements. Okay, in terms of flammable refrigerants, remote controls, and emergency signs and labels. And again, emergency signs and labels refers back to the International Mechanical Code. We want to protect the first responders. 1107 talks about refrigerant piping, the enclosures, the risers, the different groups of refrigerants and how they have to be protected. 11073 talks about condensation. And then 11074 talks about what are the allowable types of materials based on refrigeration classes. So you want to take a look at that prior to doing any installs. Talks about stop valves. And then finally in 1108 we talk about field testing. We basically say that every refrigeration system that is installed and assembled in the field has to be pressure tested. And you have to use an inert gas such as nitrogen. You cannot use oxygen to pressure test refrigeration systems. And then the test results have to be shown with a declaration. And 1109 says that refrigeration systems has to be periodically tested. Okay, treatment and flare systems, valves and apparatuses, fans and associated equipment for emergency pure ventilation, and detection and alarm systems have to be tested. So looking back at this chapter, it's telling you how to install it, it's telling you how to maintain it, it's telling you how to operate it, and it's telling you what's in it. And the whole purpose of this chapter is, again, safety for both the occupants, the technician, and the first responders. This is minimum code requirement. So what I want you to do now is I want you to read back through this chapter since we've discussed it. You need to be able to locate material in this chapter and apply it to actual situations. So you're going to read the chapter, you're going to do the you're going to do the questions that are in the assignment tab of this lesson, and then you're going to participate in the discussion board postings that go along with this chapter. Make sure you also answer some go in on the discussions from your fellow students as well.